โมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนะมัสสามิ Tonight we've come together to practice, and we're also dedicating tonight's service to Madam Swan Ah Hin, the mother of Jeffrey, our president. One of the recurring teachings of Luang Por Chah's, one of the themes he brought up over and over again, especially at times, say, of funerals and when somebody's passed away, is the simple reflection that this body is not mine. It's not a self. It's not a being, a person that we can command and control. It goes according to nature. So, why do we have to die? Well, because we were born. Whatever's born must die. Whoever is born must die. That's how nature is. Our life in this world is temporary. It's the nature of physical conditions and mental conditions. Sankharas are temporary, inconstant, transient, impermanent, subject to change. So, death is inevitable. We must all face that reality one day. So when our loved ones die, then it's a time to reflect on their lives with gratitude and appreciation for all they've done for us personally and for that which they've done for others in the family or in the broader circle of relatives or even in society. The good things they've done, it's a time to remember that, but also to accept the fact that life is temporary. The Buddha compared the life of a human being to a drop of dew on a blade of grass. In the morning, the dew is there. When you wake up, you come out, you see drops of dew on the grass. But as the day goes on, the sun comes up, gradually the dew evaporates. So the life of human beings gradually fades and evaporates. And that's the same truth for everyone, without exception. So this is something to reflect on over and over again in our life, so that we become clear, without doubt, without confusion about this fact, so that it can spur us on to do more good and use our time, which is so limited, for doing the best that we can in this world, in this life. And that's why we come to practice the Dhamma. We're interested, intent in doing something good for ourselves and for others. That's why people come to Buddhist monasteries, is to learn, to find out more about the truth, become mindful of the truth, and use that as a way to improve and change themselves for the better. That's why people become Buddhist monks and nuns, is to change for the better, to learn. But whether you're a layperson or a member of the Sangha, the truths are the same. And we're practicing to bring our mind in line with the truth, to understand it and free ourselves from all ignorance, delusion, wrong views, misunderstandings. When I was a young monk, or before I was a monk, when I was a lay person, came to stay. I went to Thailand, came to stay at Wat Nana Chat, and also spent time at Ajahn Chah's monastery, Wat Papong. One of the teachings you'd hear over and over again, apart from the impermanence of things, is the fact that if we're suffering, it's because of our ditthi mana. Ditthi means attachment to views of self, views and beliefs and opinions that if we hold too tightly to, can become a cause for conflict, cause for arguments, cause for doubt, self-doubt, doubt about others, cause for all kinds of problems. Backed up with mana, which means conceit, sense of self. So attachment to views and attachment to sense of self is the cause for lots of suffering. So that's drummed into you when you stay in Ajahn Chah's monastery. It's drummed into you. If you're suffering, it's because of ditthi and mana. If your mind is full of mental agitation, thoughts, worries, anger, desire, ditthi and mana is usually the root cause of the problem. If you have a problem with another person in the monastery, it's ditthi mana. So it becomes a shorthand for why we're not peaceful. And together with tanha, a sort of a third culprit craving that comes along and joins ditthi mana as a threesome, then you get mental proliferation. When I first went to Ajahn Chah's monastery, it was many years ago. There was no electricity, so obviously it's a totally different era. No phone, no computer, very simple living in the jungle in northeast Thailand. So very little distraction, very little comfort, very little to sort of cling on to for comfort. So you as soon as you come into the monastery, you would see your own mind very quickly because it was a different environment and situation from what you'd been used to previously, and two, because there's a little distraction, so you had not much choice but to know your own mind and see your own mind at work every day, in every situation. Thoughts and moods coming up all the time, reactions to things with pleasure, with displeasure. But it's all what we call ditthi mana. And so Ajahn Chah used to say, become aware of that, observe that. Where is suffering coming from? Well, on the course level, it's usually ditthi and mana. Where does the ditthi and mana come from? Well, it's ingrained into us since we're born. Because of our misunderstanding of truth, ignorance, delusions, we build up this sense of self-view from day one in our life. And you come into a monastery and that's immediately exposed. It's not all wrong, but it basically becomes the cause of suffering. Many people were drawn to practice with Ajahn Chah partly because of his clear explanation of the teachings, partly because of his great peace that emanated from him, sense of peace, kindness, compassion, wisdom. Also because of just his adherence to the Vinaya, the monastic discipline. And for most people coming to live in a monastery, that would be the first place that ditthi and mana would emerge. You're encountering an environment where a high level of personal discipline is required. Rules, regulations, practices, do's and don'ts and schedules and things you have to attend to, duties, responsibilities would all be coming up as you enter the monastery. And a few people have a kind of natural self-discipline, but most people don't. So most people have to learn it, and the way you learn it is when ditthi and mana come up as reactions to things you're told to do or things you're obliged to follow, practices you have to do. The voice in the mind, why do we have to do this? I remember I had one friend, a monk, who was in the monastery. You had to get up for 3 a.m. There was a 3 a.m. wake-up bell every day, a loud bell. And so it became the kind of the first thing you hear in the day for many people, and often associated with a reaction of why do you have to get up at 3 a.m.? Why can't it be just a little bit later? So many people associated that bell with a sense of aversion or torture. But I had one friend who had real problems with sleep. So always oversleeping, missing the bell, which was your first there's the first activity of the day was to hear the bell, get up and come together for group meditation and chanting. And so he kept missing it or coming late. So he was very embarrassed about that and very annoyed with himself for his lack of discipline or effort. Nobody gave him a lot of problems with it, but it was his own wish to train and get beyond his attachment to sleep. That sort of brought him to this sort of state of frustration. And we were talking about it, and he said, "Oh, what can I do?" And one of the ways monks practice with different habits or ill discipline, lack of discipline, or problems that they have is to make resolutions, determinations. So we discussed it, and he said, "I'm going to make a resolution, a solemn resolution in front of the Buddha statue. You come into the hall, you bow, and say, I'm going to make sure I get up when the bell rings at 3 a.m. I'm going to get up, whatever." So he made his solemn resolution, and he went back. And that night he went to sleep, and about 2:55 a.m. before the bell rang, he had a dream. And Ajahn Chah came to him in the dream and pointed to a page in a book. And the book was the book which many people have read, Still Forest Pool. And there's one page, I can't remember the number of the page, but Luang Por Chah pointed out that page and the page number in this dream. And so he quickly got the book after he woke up because of the dream. He's so shocked, and got that page, and it said, "Monks at Wat Nong Pong rise at 3 a.m. every day." And he said, after that, he never had a problem. He was committed to getting up at 3 a.m. Luang Por Chah had pointed it out, and it worked. His resolution, his determination had worked. Life in the monastery is like that. You come to live in a monastery, there's a lot of commitment and discipline required. So it's not for everyone, but it certainly trains you. And what it brings up is this, it helps you to see ditthi and mana, your attachment to views on what's right and wrong, how things should be, how they shouldn't be, what you like, what you don't like. And then mana, sense of self. So monks would go to Ajahn Chah and say, "What do I do with this? All my opinions and views, my attachment to this sense of self," because it's always coming up, arguing with the rules, arguing with the routine, arguing in your own mind, arguing even with other monks sometimes. What to do about it? And Ajahn Chah would say, "Well, just let it die." And he'd use this phrase a lot. So you actually living in a Buddhist monastery, you get used to the concept of death early on, even if you're very young, fit, and far from physical death. You're getting used to the idea of mental death. You'd say, if it's no good, let it die. If you're attached to your opinions and views and they're stirring your mind up, making you unhappy in one way or another, let it die. Because ultimately they're impermanent. And whatever's impermanent can die, can cease. And he said, just watch your opinions and views and that sense of self arise, and then wait and keep watching, and it'll pass away. Whether it's aversion to getting up early in the morning, aversion to certain parts of the daily routine, all kinds of things, it would bring up frustration, aversion, longing for things that you haven't got, upset with the things you have got. It used to say, just let it die. Some people, they would arrive in the monastery, and Ajahn Chah would say, "Are you ready to die?" And that get people really worried. Because they had 2 skeletons in the main meditation hall, just for teaching purposes, to teach people that, ultimately you're a skeleton. That's what you have inside of you, and everyone has a skeleton. And it's not pretty, and it's not what we want, but that's the truth of things. So they'd hear the words, "Are you ready to die?" and then look at a skeleton and they start to think, "Oh, is this some kind of terrible torture place?" He'd used this phrase a lot, "let it die," because that's what we have to do. That's what we're practicing, is to let the causes of suffering in our heart die. The attachment to views and opinions, the attachment to this sense of self, and all that mental proliferation and suffering. You say, let it die. When my brother first came to visit me, I was weighing about 59 kilograms, so I'd become very skinny. He came to visit me from the UK, and he took one look at me and he said, "Oh, this really is a prison camp, isn't it? You look like you're an inmate from some kind of torture camp." I said, no, we're just practicing restraint. We eat 1 meal a day. And the food was good enough, it was adequate, but there wasn't too much, and there wasn't much luxurious food in those days. So monks would be very skinny, and they would be very energetic, and get up early in the morning and meditate and work and do their duties. But it wasn't all easy because of the mind, because of ditthi and mana. They're like your 2 nagging friends who's always in the background, kind of ready to cause you problems. Why do we get up early in the morning? Why does the food have to be mixed in the bowl? We have 1 bowl and we eat 1 meal a day. And in those days they would often serve out the food. You didn't even choose what food you got. It was just put in your bowl, and often you got food that you didn't like, or food that you did like, you didn't get as much as you would like. You just have to accept it, and accept those views and opinions that would come up. When Ajahn Chah was there, well, let it die. Everyone's the same. You'd say, "I'm not here to spoil you," which is quite a mature teaching, but it's really what we need, isn't it? What we try to do when we follow our views and opinions and our desires is we try to spoil ourselves. If it's not someone else spoiling us, we try to spoil ourselves. And the means for that are constantly expanding in this world. There's more toys and technology and nice food and nice things in this world, more and more as time progresses. So the opportunity to spoil ourselves is always growing. The temptation and the means to spoil ourselves. So perhaps practice is getting harder, I don't know. But you see that mind that wants to just indulge, especially when it's not getting what it wants. So you don't get the food you want. So you become very sharp, like your eyes become razor sharp. I remember in those days, you never got milk. I'm from the West, Europe, where we have a dairy culture. So it's things like milk and bread are very important or very normal. You get used to them, but then of course when they're cut off, you think about them or you miss them. And you never got bread in northeast Thailand. Milk would come occasionally. Like the king of Thailand actually set up a dairy back in the 60s. He was a very far-reaching, visionary kind of man, and he set up a dairy farm and started producing milk. And occasionally they'd bring cartons of milk to the monastery. But they'd sell these little cartons of milk in a 6-pack. I remember, say, at Wat Nanachat, you'd be there at mealtime and there might be 8 monks and a couple of novices, but they bring a 6-pack of milk. So you know somebody is not going to get the milk. So your eyes are picked up, oh, milk has arrived. Once a month or once in a while someone brings some milk. But then you count how many cartons, how many monks sitting. And then the ditthi mana kicks in. This is not fair. Why did they only bring 6? And, you never know. And maybe some kind, generous monk would give up their opportunity to take their milk carton so that someone further down the line would get it. Monks were often doing that because it's one way you can practice letting go, practice generosity, by refusing to take something you're entitled to and passing it on to the next monk. You could actually practice some generosity and kindness in a situation. So sometimes that would happen, and people would give up something that they really wanted and teach themselves. But sometimes they wouldn't. Sometimes you miss out, and then you have to sit there controlling your ditthimana as it comes up. This is not fair. Why I'm the junior one? They should be giving the milk to me. I'm the young one who is new to the practice, and you have all your reasons. But it's all pointless. It's just mental proliferations. And then you remember Ajahn Chah's teaching and let it die. So you just let it fade away. And the mind goes back to peace until the next thing. So you ask monks how your practice is going. In those days, young monks would often say, well, it's just one thing after another. If it's not the food, it's the getting up in the morning, it's the mosquitoes, it's the heat, it's the this, it's the that. Every morning we go out on Bindabata, and in those days all the roads were gravel roads. And gravel can be quite sharp, little sharp pebbles, stones from the quarry. And you walk down the road with your soft Western feet, and it could be very painful. You see monks kind of looking for that little bit of grass or soft mud to step on because the gravel was so sharp. And that's something you have to do, a compulsory practice. You have to go on alms rounds. So you'd walk down the road with your bowl. You need to go to get food, but at the same time, you have to deal with the gravel on the road and the feeling of pain in your feet. So some monks would tiptoe along, someone would look for shortcuts where they could go on the soft mud. Some would just convince themselves, they say, it's good for you, it's like a foot massage. In China and Taiwan they give you a foot massage by walking on sharp pebbles. So this is our morning foot massage. Whatever worked to try and get you through it. And you go to the village, but then people were very kind and they'd give you rice and whatever they had. They were very poor people, but they'd share. They'd come out every day without fail. Even in pouring rain, they'd come out. So you got a bit uplifted. So the ditthimana went quiet for a while. The people are kind, and you get some gratitude and appreciation. Ditthimana doesn't like that. Ditthimana goes to the back of your mind when you're feeling inspired or aroused by people's faith and their goodwill. That helps you. And you come back to the monastery and it's more gravel road. Sometimes in the pouring rain. Sometimes you get back to the monastery in the rainy season and you get into the monastery and your robe is so wet, you just wring it out and the water comes out. And it's always a brown colour because of the dye from the robe. Sometimes you have to wear your robe wet as you eat the meal because there's no way of getting it dry beforehand. So as I said, it was one thing after another, and you just learn. You learn to watch your mind and take Ajahn Chah's teaching to heart. Observe the arising and passing away of thoughts, mental phenomena. So monks would use, like these funeral chants we just did, monks would introduce them into their day. So you just have a mood of despair and hopelessness, and then you chant, Anicca vata sankhara, just as if you're a funeral, and another monk would see you chanting, say, why are you chanting that? And they say, it's the funeral of my ditthimana, of my rage, of my mood, just letting it die here. And they'd laugh and carry on doing something. It's like that. And once in a while you'd have a work project in the heat of the day when you're tired, all you want to do is go and sleep because you got up at 3 a.m. But then there'd be a work project, a compulsory work project. And some monks would say, I'm not going because I'm going to sit meditation. And they go off and meditate. But then they couldn't meditate because they're thinking about all their friends doing this job of work. So they said, can't do the meditation, feel guilty or feel bad that not joining in the work. So off they go, give up the meditation. And the ones doing the work would see the one who had been meditating come and say, here he comes, the traitor. But then happy because they've given up their meditation to join the work. And usually a work project was something useful for the community, and there wasn't much money, and there wasn't a chance to pay people to do some jobs. You just came together as a community and did some work. Sometimes very tired, and by the time the work was done, it would be time for the daily chores anyway, and then it would be time for the evening meditation. So sometimes a day would just whiz by from one activity to the next. But at the same time, you just watch your mind, the peaks and the troughs, the ups and the downs, the highs and the lows. So you'd always get a high in the afternoon, maybe late afternoon, there'd be another bell. And this would be the happy bell. You know, there's the sad bell, the 3 a.m. bell, then there's the happy bell of the 5 p.m. drink, if there was one, and often there wasn't. But if there was one, some fruit juice or a cold Pepsi Cola or a cup of tea, and once in a while a cup of coffee. So then you see the other side of the coin, the Ditthimana, that said, yes, drinks time, and the mind is elated and happy and everyone's smiling, and then you say, it should be like this every day. But it's not, because sometimes nobody offered these things, and you're a monk, so you can't go out and buy them. You just have to accept. If it comes, it comes. If it doesn't, it doesn't. So you're high for a while, and then that mood passes, so that dies. So even the excitement and the pleasure dies. So after a while of this, observing your mind, you see things, don't you? You learn, the excitement dies, the despair dies, the views and opinions arise and pass away, they die, the pleasurable feelings die, the unpleasant feelings die. So you get familiar with this concept of death, the inner death of moods and attachments, the arising and passing away of mental formations, sankharas. So actually living in a Buddhist monastery, you become very familiar with the whole concept of impermanence and death. Whether it's just the death of a mood or the death of a person, because obviously when people do die, their relatives often come to perform services, chanting, make offerings on behalf of the dead. But it's a theme you just become totally familiar with the longer you stay, and that helps because you start looking at life in this way, seeing the impermanent nature of body and mind, the changing nature of the body, changing nature of your mental states. You become familiar with that, used to that, and that's wisdom. And as mindfulness improves, you're seeing that more and more clearly. And the ability to let go of the attachment to views and opinions and this sense of self, you get better at it. So maybe the first year in a monastery has lots of emotional ups and downs and missing things you like and getting angry when you don't get what you want, but then after a while maybe that smooths out a bit because you know these things are not really a self, a being, a person. They're just states of mind that arise, pass away. And you've seen them arise and pass away maybe hundreds, thousands of times even, through your practice observing the mind, just through very ordinary situations. Getting up early, sometimes staying up late, not getting what you want, sometimes getting what you want and seeing the elation, the happiness of that. This is what we call Dhamma practice, real practice. If practice is all about getting what you want, relaxation, being spoiled, well, it may have a brief therapeutic effect, especially if you've been traumatized or very depressed or something. It may have a temporary aid to you, but really the heart of the practice is getting to see the impermanent nature of your own body and mind and your experience of the world. And so Ajahn Chah, if there is a way of practice, Ajahn Chah taught, well, this is part of it, getting to see your mind, how it changes according to causes, conditions, but ultimately there's no self, no person in that. It's the causes and conditions that did it. You even get people talking like that. You say, how are you doing today? So I feel really down. But I know it's just causes and conditions. It's not really me. Sometimes that helps. So you get used to talking the language of Dhamma and Vinaya, talking and thinking in that way. Thinking in the way of the rules, what I have to do, what I shouldn't do. Learning to develop a sense of awareness of wholesome karma, unwholesome karma, cultivating the wholesome, abandoning the unwholesome, and getting, the language of the Dhamma that helps you to understand what you're experiencing. And some people just keep doing it and you see great results over the years. Some people do it for a while and then leave. Ajahn Chah said monks are like mangoes. Some stay on the tree until they're ripe and you can pick them and eat them. Some fall off before they're ripe. You just have to accept that. Everybody's karma is different. One thing you learn, having been a monk, say, for many, many years, you see many, many monks and nuns and lay practitioners practicing over many years, where you see the value of the practice, what it does to a human being when one commits to the practice. It changes a person for the better. Because a lot of that attachment to views and opinions and the moods, the ups and downs and the likes and the dislikes does start to fade, and it's replaced by something better in mindfulness and wisdom, understanding of the truth. And you see that happening over and over again. And everyone is in the same position. You come into a monastery, everyone starts at the same place, an untrained mind, learning to keep the rules, learning to meditate, learning to be mindful. So no one's any better or worse than the others. But those who stick with it gain from that practice. Ajahn Chah said to really benefit from the practice, you have to give up to the practice. And that's an impersonal thing. You might also give up to the teacher as well, but really it's beyond the teacher as a person. You're giving up to the practice, you're giving up to the way of training. And the more you give up, the more you gain. What are you giving up? Well, you're giving up the attachment to your views and opinions, your sense of self, all the things you want and like, and all the things you hate. Giving all of that up by giving up to the practice. Sometimes the word he would use is surrender. Actually surrender to the Dhamma. We argue, don't we? We fight with the Dhamma half the time. We fight with the Vinaya half the time. You come into a monastery and you're arguing, why do I have to do this? This isn't right. I shouldn't have to do this. It's not fair. If it was a workplace out in the world, you would say, oh, I'm not doing this unless they pay me a lot of money. But it's different. In a monastery, you're not getting paid money. You're there because you choose to be there. So you can't blame anyone, and you can't say it's for money, I'm only doing this for the money. You're doing it to train yourself. But if you understand this point and you realize to give up to the training is the way to develop, to get beyond these attachments that cause you so much suffering. So he'd even ask that. He'd ask a new monk, he'd say, have you given up to the practice yet? Have you surrendered to the Dhamma Vinaya? But you trust that the Dhamma Vinaya is coming from a good place because it's coming from the Buddha, an enlightened Buddha with compassion and wisdom. So it's not like surrendering to an enemy. The Dhamma Vinaya is not your enemy, it's your friend. It's just it brings up a lot of things. And so sometimes you mistakenly see the Dhamma Vinaya as your enemy. I hate the rules, I hate getting up early, I hate one meal a day. You get that reaction. But if you look beyond it and develop some wisdom and you observe your mind, you see, well, really the Dhamma that lies beyond that is your trusted friend. It's what's good. It's all that's good because it's bringing your mind to a place of peace and understanding. And the practices we do in a monastery, they're leading and supporting you in the practice of meditation. Sometimes Ajahn Chah would say, well, you don't need to do much. You just follow the routine, follow the rules, do the meditation when they meditate, do the work when they work, get up when they get up, go to bed when they go to bed. You just follow that and let go of everything else, all your doubts, all your worries, all your anger. After 5 years, you'll be enlightened. He'd say you don't have to do anything special and you'll be enlightened. But the special thing is just doing it, doing what is quite ordinary and doable by human beings, but just keep doing it. because sometimes our attachment to self, views and opinions get the better of us, and we give up, or we stray from the practice, or get so fed up, we leave, or whatever. He'd say, just learn to do this. And sometimes it even a very kind of novel ways of teaching, and people would say, "Oh, Ajahn Chah, this practice is so difficult. The Buddha taught so many different methods, and there's so many different suttas. It seems so complex." And true, the Buddha taught 84,000 different Dhamma teachings, we say. It's a lot. And Ajahn Chah would say, well, you don't have to read every sutta or learn everything. And you can study a lot, and there's nothing wrong with that if it supports your practice. But you can also practice very simply. He'd say, he'd pick up a spittoon. Yes, pick up a spittoon. These things that monks use to put rubbish in or spit in, or use it as a urinal in the kuti at night. He said, you put your spittoon down, and then maybe a minute later you pick it up and you move it here. And then a minute later you pick it up and you move it here. And you just keep doing that, and that's all it is, and anyone can do that. Just be mindful of that, as simple as that. And you could probably do it for a little while, and then you get bored or restless, or what's next? So the mind strays away from the practice. But the actual practice that is required, he said, for enlightenment, it's as simple as that. It's just learning to pay attention and know yourself in the present moment, know your mind, know the breath, if that's your meditation object, know what's arising in your mind, what's passing away, observing yourself, observing your body, your posture. And you can do that at any time. Some monks would complain and say, oh, there's too much work, too many chores, cleaning, working, doing this, doing that. And he said, well, when you're doing those things, are you breathing? And of course they have to say yes. Well, if you can breathe, then you can practice. You can watch the breath, you can recite Buddha, you can be mindful as you do those activities. What you're training in is Dhamma Vinaya, the Eightfold Noble Path, training this mind to see the truth from moment to moment so it doesn't fall into suffering. But that's not confined to one posture or one particular practice. You're learning to watch the mind, and you can use many techniques, many different ways of practice to achieve that. And you can watch your mind as you're sweeping, as you're eating, as you're falling asleep, as you're chanting, as you're meditating. The important thing is, are you doing it? Are you paying attention? So he would always be encouraging people to come back to the present moment. Don't linger in the past and miss all the things that you had in the past. Don't spend all your time dreaming about the future, imagining what it will be like, which is a famous, regular pastime of monks. When I go there, then I'll be peaceful and my practice will go really well. You're always dreaming of the perfect place you're going to go for practice. And he said, don't do that. Don't waste your time fantasizing about the future. Just accept the present moment. Again, give up to the present moment and the practice in the present moment, and you'll find peace there. More often than not, monks would dream about some ideal place to practice, and they'd actually get to go there one day, and they go there and they find they have exactly the same thing. Same mind that's restless, caught into views and opinions, ups and downs, sometimes peaceful, sometimes not. Not much different from where they were before. So those kind of monks, Ajahn Chah would say, were no better than a mangy dog. A mangy dog is itching because of its skin disease. It just come along and it think, I'm going to sit down here and I'll feel better. So it sits down for a while, feels good for just a short while, and then it starts to itch again and it yelps. It gets up and runs to a new spot under a new tree or something. Sits down, thinks it's all going to be good here, and then it starts itching again. Goes off, and the dog doesn't realize the problem is the mange. It's not the place, it's the mange. Ajahn Chah said the problem is not the place, it's your mind, your attachment to your ditthi, your mana, your craving, what we call kilesa. We carry that with us wherever we go. It's not like you leave one place and you leave it all behind. You know, that's your wish, but it just doesn't work like that. So I encourage you to watch your mind, because that's where the causes of suffering arise, and that's where you can see them end as well. And sometimes if you're watching, you just see it end right there, some attachment, some way of thinking, wrong thinking, some attachment to a view, an opinion, some mood of pleasure or displeasure. You just see it end and you know, oh, it's impermanent, it's not that important. You know, when you see impermanence, you are seeing things that you grasp at are not that important. It's not that they're not there, they don't exist, but they're not that important, so you start to let things go. So the practice is not necessarily that difficult. It's as difficult as we make it. It's as difficult as we think it to be. And you can make the practice of Buddhism, meditation, mindfulness very difficult if you think a lot about it, worry about it, doubt about it. If you build up a lot of hopes and expectations which you are not achieving and always practicing to get something, you know, we can make practice a lot of suffering. But the idea is to turn around and look at that, the one who makes this suffering out of the practice. Who is it who wants all this? Is there a person there anyway? Who is it who's desiring, who wants results, who wants peace, who wants knowledge and wisdom? It's that very desire is the cause of suffering. And if you can identify that, observe that, then rather following it, you let it go, let it die. But come back to this let it die phrase that he'd use a lot. And one of the results of that, you practice with that over and over again, is you get used to looking at life in that way. And it's not necessarily depressing to see the impermanent nature of your own states of mind and your body and the world around you. It's just seeing the way things are. And because you're freeing your mind from a lot of delusion and the causes of suffering, you know, it's not depressing, you actually feel at ease, you feel happier for knowing the way things are. You know, when you let go of delusion, it's like that. It's a relief to the mind. And now I understand. Before I didn't understand and I suffered. Now I understand I don't suffer. Well, you're going to feel better. So it's not depressing to see the impermanent nature of things. Even the things that we really attach to strongly and love and want. But if you can bring your mind to accept the impermanence of them, it's a relief. You don't have to become so caught up in grief and sadness with separation. You can appreciate the good in people, in yourself, in others, but you also know it's impermanent. Things don't last. So ultimately what brings us peace is wisdom, understanding. It's not that the practice of mindfulness, development of samadhi isn't important. It is, because it facilitates that ability to observe and understand the truth. But ultimately it's wisdom, developing right view, right understanding that frees your mind from the causes of suffering. It's not cruel or unkind sometimes to point these things out. It's another thing that sometimes people misunderstand. They think, oh, teaching impermanence, you know, you're kind of ruining all the fun. There's no fun after you see impermanence. And teachers who pointed out, it's like, oh, they just can't enjoy anything now because it's all impermanent. I mean, they're just out of compassion pointing to the truth, the deeper truth, which is liberating to the mind. And some truths are at first difficult to accept. But it's a compassionate teacher who points them out. If Ajahn Chah used to say, I'm not going to hide the truth from you. Because the truth is the truth, and it's the truth that liberates us, not kind of, covering it over or hiding it and kind of building it up into something or kind of softening the blow or something. He would teach things as they are. So at first that can be a bit tough when you face that, but in the long run you appreciate it because you'd rather have the truth than a lot of lies. And who is it lies to us the most? It's our own mind. It's not other people. We lie to ourselves every day by saying, oh, if I get that, then I'll be happy. And you get it and you realize, oh, I'm not happy because it's temporary, it's impermanent. That thing, going to that place, meeting that person, all the things we want and aspire to and expect in life, they're not ultimately going to bring us permanent happiness, but our mind lies to us and said they will. That's delusion. Or if I get rid of that thing I don't like, then I'll be happy, is another delusion. Because as long as you've got the causes, the craving that leads to moods of aversion, rejection, as long as we focus on things that we don't like with ignorance, then it will keep happening to us. Even if you get rid of what you don't like, something else will come along and the same process will reoccur. The only way to get rid of aversion and anger is to see the suffering of that attachment and let it go. So whether it's liking or disliking, we have to see ultimately our own mind lies to us, tricks us, cheats us, always finding excuses, always having good explanations for why we shouldn't let go, and then bringing us more suffering. So we do it to ourselves. So Ajahn Chah would have a great sense of humour with that. People would be suffering over what they miss, what they want, not having what they want, missing what they don't have, upset with what they have got. He'd just chuckle, because this is just the affair of the deluded mind, the mental defilements, what we call ditthi mana, the sense of self, the attachment to views, desires. He would just chuckle because he understood it very well, because he'd gone through it all himself. It's not like he hadn't gone through that process of suffering and seen the causes of suffering, let them go. He had. So then in other people he could see it very well. And he'd try and see the funny side of it and help people, because that often helps, doesn't it, when you see the funny side. So like the young American monk in the car who's missing his girlfriend, and gets up the courage to ask Ajahn Chah, oh, missing my girlfriend, can I write a letter to her? So in those days you didn't have phone calls, and you quite often didn't even write letters. And if you received a letter, it was usually opened by the senior monk. Ajahn Chah might open the monk's letters and have them read out to him. So it was a different world. And that monk said, oh, I'm missing my girlfriend, can I write to her? And Ajahn Chah unexpectedly said, yes. But when you write the letter, get her to enclose a little gift. Oh yeah, what's that? A little bit of her poo, so that when you get it, you can sniff it. Because that's as much your girlfriend as any other part of her. And you might think, oh, that sounds a bit tough, a bit cruel, but yeah, he's just trying to give the full picture. When you love something, there's the good side of it and the bad. There's the beautiful, the unattractive together in life. So some of his teachings should be very direct, to the point, the truth. But that's what liberates us. That's what gets us to see and understand the way things are. So maybe for tonight I'll just say this much.